The throne room was too quiet for a place that had seen so much blood. Ned Stark stood before the Iron Throne, its twisted blades rising like frozen screams behind it. The smell of smoke still lingered in the air from the sack of the city. Lannister banners now hung where dragons once ruled. Bodies had been dragged away, but the memory of them remained, heavy and bitter. Robert Baratheon stood beside him, one hand resting on the pommel of his warhammer, the other gripping a goblet of wine like it was the only thing keeping him steady. "Sit," Robert said, nodding toward the throne. "You were the first through the gates. The city would not have fallen without you. The men would follow you." The Ned didn't move. The throne looked wrong. It looked hungry. "I did not come south for a crown," Ned said quietly. "I came for justice." Robert gave a tired laugh. "Justice? Aerys is dead. Targaryen children are dead. The war is won, is it?" Ned asked. Robert's jaw tightened. Behind them, lords whispered. Some wore the colors of the Stormlands. Some wore gold and crimson. Tywin Lannister stood not far away, silent as stone, watching everything, calculating. Robert stepped closer. "Listen to me, Ned. I do not want this cursed chair. I never did. I wanted Lyanna. I wanted peace. You are the better man. The realm would be safer with you." Ned looked at his friend. Not the king, not the rebel leader, just Robert, the boy who once laughed in Winterfell's halls. But that boy was gone. War had eaten him. "The realm needs strength," Robert continued. "It needs a man who can hold it together." "And you think I can?" Ned asked. "Yes." Ned looked again at the throne. Swords taken from enemies, melted together. A monument to conquest, not honor, to fear, not loyalty. He thought of the North, of Winterfell, of Catelyn waiting, of Jon Arryn, who had guided them like a father, of the children who would grow up in a kingdom born from fire and betrayal. "I will not take it," Ned said. The words landed like a dropped blade. The whispers grew louder. Robert stared at him. "What did you say?" "I will not take the crown. I swore to fight against madness, not to replace it. I am Lord of Winterfell. That is all I ever meant to be." Robert's face went red. "Damn it, Ned. This is not about what you want. This is about the realm. And the realm does not need another man who thinks ruling is a burden forced upon him," Ned replied calmly. "If you sit that throne, you must want it, even if only a little." Robert turned away, running a hand through his hair. "You think I want it? You think I enjoy this?" "No," Ned said softly. "But you are the one the banners were raised for. You are the one with Targaryen blood. If anyone has a claim strong enough to stop another war, it is you." At the mention of Targaryen blood, several lords shifted uncomfortably. It was thin blood, distant, but it was there. Enough to justify rebellion, enough to calm fearful houses. Tywin Lannister finally stepped forward. "Lord Stark speaks wisely," he said smoothly. "The realm requires legitimacy. The people must believe this change was lawful, not simply victorious." Ned did not miss the faint smirk hidden beneath Tywin's calm face. This was what the Lion wanted. A king he could influence, a throne he could surround with gold. Robert looked between them. "So that's it? You walk away?" "I return north," Ned said. "The North bled for this war. It needs rebuilding. My duty is there." Robert's voice lowered. "And what of me?" Ned met his eyes. "If you take the throne, you will not stand alone. I will serve as warden of the North. I will honor my oath to you. But I will not be king." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Robert laughed, not in humor but in disbelief. "You stubborn wolf." He turned toward the throne and stared at it. The weight of it seemed to press against him already. "If I take it," Robert said slowly, "I will need strong men beside me." "You will," Ned agreed. "Then you will serve as my hand," Robert said suddenly. "If you will not wear the crown, you will stand beside it." Ned hesitated. The South was a nest of snakes. He could feel it already. The Lannisters had come too late to be trusted, yet too powerful to ignore. The Reach had bent the knee quickly. Dorne was silent, and silence from Dorne was never good. If I accept, Ned said carefully, it will be to keep the peace, not to play games. Robert snorted. You were never good at games. That is why I must be careful. Tywin's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. The lords began to kneel, one by one, sensing the direction of power. All hail King Robert, someone shouted. The words echoed in the hall. Robert Baratheon slowly climbed the steps. Each footstep sounded heavy. When he finally turned and sat upon the Iron Throne, the blades cut lightly into his arm. A thin line of blood appeared. Some would say later that the throne rejected him. Others would say it was a sign of strength. Ned Stark watched from below. He felt no pride, only a deep, uneasy feeling in his chest. He had refused the crown. He had chosen honor over power. But as the cheers filled the hall and the lion banners seemed to grow brighter behind the throne, Ned could not shake the thought that perhaps the realm had not needed a good man to refuse power. Perhaps it needed a good man to seize it. And far away, in hidden corners of the city, whispers had already begun. The wolf had stepped aside. And lions do not waste such chances. The celebrations lasted 3 days, but the tension never left the air. Music filled the Red Keep. Wine flowed like river water. Lords laughed too loudly. Alliances were sealed with forced smiles and cautious handshakes. On the surface, the war was over. A new king sat the Iron Throne. The realm was united. But Ned Stark had been in enough battlefields to recognize the silence before another storm. Robert wore the crown heavily. It did not suit him the way armor did. He laughed, yes. He drank even more. But there was something restless in his eyes now, something uncertain. He had won the war, but he had not prepared for ruling, and ruling was a different kind of war. Ned had accepted the chain of the hand of the king reluctantly. When the maester placed it around his neck, it felt colder than northern steel. He told himself he would remain only long enough to steady the realm, to prevent chaos. Then he would return home. But already, he could see the cracks. Tywin Lannister did not waste time. On the 4th morning after the coronation, Ned entered the small council chamber for the first official meeting of the new reign. The long table gleamed, sunlight filtered through high windows, but the warmth did nothing to ease the chill in the room. Tywin sat composed, hands folded. Beside him sat his daughter Cersei, golden and unreadable. Jon Arryn was there too, his old eyes watchful. Varys stood near the wall, soft and smiling as always. Petyr Baelish leaned casually in his chair, fingers tapping together like a man counting invisible coins. Robert arrived late, smelling of wine. Let's get this done, he grumbled, dropping into his seat. The war's finished. What's left to discuss? Debts, Tywin answered calmly. The word hung in the air. Robert frowned. Debts? The crown is nearly bankrupt, Jon Arryn said gently. Years of Aerys's madness drained the treasury. The war itself was costly. Robert waved a hand. Then we'll tax the Reach. They bent the knee fast enough. Tywin's voice remained smooth. The Reach supported the Targaryens until the very end. Punishing them too harshly risks another rebellion. And what do you suggest? Ned asked quietly. Tywin's green eyes shifted to him. Stability. The realm requires unity. A marriage, perhaps. A joining of houses to secure loyalty. Everyone knew what he meant. Cersei did not react, but her gaze flicked briefly toward Robert. Robert groaned. Gods, not this again. The realm needs a queen, Tywin said. A strong one. House Lannister has the wealth to ease the crown's burdens. Petyr Baelish smirked faintly. Gold can be quite persuasive. Ned felt the trap closing. If the crown becomes dependent on Lannister gold, Ned said evenly, the crown will no longer be independent. Tywin tilted his head slightly. The crown will have allies, or masters, Ned replied. The room grew still. Robert looked between them, irritated. Enough riddles. Say what you mean, Stark. Ned did not break eye contact with Tywin. I mean, the realm must not exchange one kind of madness for another. If we tie the throne too closely to one house, the others will grow resentful. And if we do not secure the throne with strength, Tywin countered, the others will grow ambitious. The words were polite, The meaning was not. Varys cleared his throat softly. Whispers travel quickly. There are still loyalists to the Targaryen cause. Viserys and the girl are alive across the narrow sea. Robert slammed his fist on the table. They're children. Children grow, Varys said. Ned felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. This was what ruling meant, not banners and battles, but choices that lingered in shadows. We will not hunt children, Ned said firmly. Robert looked at him. No one suggesting that. Varys offered a small, knowing smile but said nothing. Tywin shifted the discussion smoothly. Regardless, the realm must see strength. A wedding would signal permanence. Robert leaned back, staring at the ceiling. You want me to marry your daughter. I offer her, Tywin corrected. Ned could see it clearly now. If Robert married Cersei, the Lannisters would sit at the heart of power. Gold would flow, but so would influence. He had refused the crown because he believed Robert's claim would unite the realm. But perhaps he had only placed a different danger upon it. Jon Arryn spoke softly. A marriage would calm many fears. Ned turned to Robert. Do you want this? Robert's face hardened for a moment. Then it softened again into something tired. Want? He muttered. Want died with Lyanna. The room fell silent. Cersei's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. Not sadness. Something sharper. Robert stood abruptly. Fine, I'll marry her, if it keeps the damn realm from tearing itself apart. Tywin bowed his head slightly. A wise decision, Your Grace. Wise. Ned felt no comfort in that word. The meeting ended soon after. As the others filed out, Tywin paused beside Ned. You are an honorable man, Lord Stark, Tywin said quietly. But honor alone does not hold kingdoms together. And gold does, Ned asked. Gold buys time, Tywin replied. Time allows power to settle. And when that time runs out? Tywin's faint smile returned. Then only the strong remain. He walked away. Ned stood alone in the chamber for a long moment. He had refused the crown because he believed he was protecting the realm from tyranny. But now the lion was closer to the throne than ever. And Robert, for all his strength, was already leaning into comfort instead of caution. Outside the chamber, he saw Cersei walking beside her father. Their voices were low, intentional. This was only the beginning. The wolf had stepped aside, believing himself noble. But in politics, empty space does not stay empty for long, and the lions were already settling in. The wedding was grand, too grand. Gold draped every balcony of the Red Keep. Crimson banners flowed from the towers like fresh-spilled blood. Lords from every corner of the Seven Kingdoms gathered to witness the union of House Baratheon and House Lannister. It was called a new beginning, a symbol of unity. But Ned Stark had lived long enough to know that when gold shines brightest, it is often hiding something dark beneath it. Robert stood before the sept, broad and powerful, wearing black and gold. Cersei walked toward him in a gown that shimmered like sunlight on metal. She looked every bit a queen already, calm, controlled, untouchable. The High Septon spoke the words, vows were exchanged. The crowd cheered, and just like that, the lion had entered the throne room permanently. Ned stood beside Jon Arryn, watching carefully, not the ceremony, the faces. Tywin did not smile much, but satisfaction radiated from him. The Reach Lords whispered among themselves, measuring this new balance of power. The Dornish representatives remained distant and cold. Dorne had lost Princess Elia and her children in the sack of the city. They had bent the knee to Robert, yes, but they had not forgiven. That wound was still open. Later that night, during the feast, Robert drank heavily. Laughter roared from his table. He clapped men on the back, boasting of battles won and enemies crushed. Cersei sat beside him like a statue carved from gold. She drank little. She observed everything. Ned approached the high table when summoned. Stark, Robert shouted, slurring slightly. Come sit. We were just talking about rebuilding the fleet. The Ironborn might get ideas. Ned took a seat, careful with his words. The realm is tired of war. We should not give them reason. Robert waved dismissively. War is always coming, Ned. Best to be ready. Cersei's eyes turned toward Ned. And how does the North feel about this new peace? She asked smoothly. The North keeps its oaths, Ned answered. As long as the crown keeps faith with it. A faint pause. Faith, she repeated softly. Such a fragile thing. Tywin leaned forward. The North is vast but sparsely populated. Its strength lies in loyalty, not numbers. We value that. Ned heard the meaning behind the compliment. The North was strong, yes, but isolated, far from the heart of power. Loyalty is earned, Ned replied evenly. Not purchased. Robert laughed loudly. Gods, you two will be at each other forever. Drink, Ned. Tonight is celebration. Ned lifted his cup, but did not drink much. As the night deepened, he noticed something else. Lannister guards were increasing around the Red Keep. Subtle, quiet. But more gold cloaks now answered to men loyal to Casterly Rock. Patir Baelish lingered often near Tywin. Conversations happened in corners. Quick, private, power was shifting. 3 weeks after the wedding, the first real crack appeared. A raven arrived from Dorne. Ned was in the council chamber when Varys delivered the message. The spymaster's soft voice carried weight. Prince Doran sends word, Varys said. He demands justice for Elia Martell and her children. He names Gregor Clegane and Amory Lorch as murderers and demands their punishment. Silence filled the room. Tywin's face did not change, but his eyes sharpened. Robert frowned. They were casualties of war. They were children, Ned said quietly. Robert looked at him sharply, careful. Ned did not look away. If we call this a new reign built on justice, then we cannot ignore this. Tywin finally spoke. Sir Gregor acted in the chaos of battle. He was not acting under direct command. The lie was smooth. Ned's voice hardened slightly. But he fought under Lannister banners, and you would execute one of the realm's strongest knights to satisfy Dorne? Tywin asked calmly. Would you risk alienating the Westerlands, and would you risk Dorne? Ned countered. Robert stood, frustration building. Damn it, the war is over. I will not start another over ghosts. They are not ghosts to Dorne, Varys murmured. Jon Arryn rubbed his temples. We must tread carefully. The room felt smaller suddenly. Ned realized something heavy in that moment. If he had taken the crown, this choice would have been his alone, his burden, his decision. But now it rested on Robert. And Robert hated decisions that did not involve a battlefield. Robert exhaled harshly. No executions. We'll send apologies, gifts, gold. Tywin inclined his head slightly, satisfied. Ned felt anger rising in his chest. Gold will not buy forgiveness for murdered children. Tywin's gaze turned cold. Gold buys many things, Lord Stark, including peace. For how long? Ned asked. Tywin did not answer. The meeting ended without resolution. But the message was clear. The Lannisters would not sacrifice their own, not even for the sake of stability. That night Ned walked alone along the walls of the Red Keep. The city stretched below him, alive with noise and smoke. King's Landing was restless, always restless. He thought of Lyanna, of promises made at her bedside, of the price of ambition. He had refused the crown because he believed it would keep him from becoming part of this corruption. But now he stood at the center of it anyway, without the authority to truly control it. Footsteps approached. It was Varys. The realm balances on fragile threads, the spymaster said softly. Sometimes the man who refuses power shapes history more than the one who takes it. Ned stared out at the city lights. If that is true, then I fear I have shaped it poorly. Varys smiled faintly. We shall see, Lord Stark. Lions are patient, but so are wolves. Below them, in the streets of King's Landing, whispers were growing louder. Dorne was angry. The Reach was cautious. The Ironborn were watching. And across the narrow sea, a young boy with silver hair was beginning to hear stories about a kingdom that had stolen his birthright. The game had only just begun. The heat in King's Landing grew heavier as the weeks passed, But it was not only the summer sun pressing down on the city. It was tension. Word from Dorne had not quieted. The apology sent by Robert, wrapped in silk and heavy with gold, was returned unopened. Along with it came a message far colder than before. Dorne would remember. Ned stood in the council chamber once more, the letter resting open on the table. The red wax seal of House Martell lay broken beside it, like a warning. Robert paced the room, restless. They dare threaten me? It is not a threat, John Aaron said gently. It is a warning. Same thing, Robert snapped. Tywin remained seated, composed as ever. Dorne has always been prideful. They will shout, perhaps posture, but they will not march north alone. And if they find allies? Ned asked quietly. Tywin's eyes flickered to him. Who would stand with them? Ned did not answer immediately. The Reach still felt slighted for having supported the Targaryens. The Stormlands were loyal to Robert, but loyalty could weaken if famine or taxes grew harsh. The Iron Islands had never loved kneeling. All it would take was one spark. They do not need allies to wound us, Ned finally said. They can close their ports, refuse trade, stir unrest in the southern lands. Praetor Baelish leaned back in his chair, smiling faintly. Unrest can be profitable if one knows how to manage it. Ned ignored him. Robert stopped pacing. What do you want me to do? Deliver Clegane's head to Sunspear? If he committed murder, then justice should be served, Ned replied firmly. Tywin's voice cooled. Careful, Lord Stark. The air shifted instantly. Ned turned to face him fully. Is justice now a dangerous word? No, Tywin said calmly. But reckless decisions are. Reckless. Ned stepped closer to the table. What is reckless is allowing powerful men to butcher children without consequence. Robert slammed his hand against the wall. Enough. Silence fell. Robert looked between them, breathing heavily. I will not tear apart my strongest alliance over this. Then you are choosing a side, Ned said quietly. Robert froze at that. Tywin watched carefully, saying nothing. Finally, Robert spoke. I am choosing peace. Ned held his gaze. Peace built on ignored crimes is fragile. Robert's expression hardened. You refuse the crown, Ned. Do not try to rule through me. The words struck harder than any blade. For a moment, the room felt distant. The memory of the Iron Throne rose in Ned's mind. The day he had stepped back. The moment he had believed he was preserving his honor. Now he wondered if he had only surrendered his influence. I advise, Ned said carefully. I do not command. Robert exhaled sharply. Then advise me how to keep this kingdom from tearing itself apart without handing over my own bannermen. Ned had no easy answer, because there wasn't one. Later that evening, as the council dispersed, Cersei approached Ned in the corridor. Her footsteps were soft, deliberate. You push hard, she said without greeting. I push for what is right. She gave a faint smile. Right and wrong are luxuries of the North. And what are they here? Ned asked. Tools, she replied calmly. He studied her face. You believe strength means protecting your own at any cost. I believe power must never look weak, she corrected. If my father allows his bannermen to be executed to satisfy Dorne, every house in the Westerlands will question him, and then they will question the crown. So the crown must look the other way? The crown must survive, she said. Ned saw it clearly now. She did not care about justice. She cared about perception, about dominance, about fear, and if survival requires corruption, he asked. Cersei's eyes sharpened, then corruption becomes necessary. She walked away before he could answer. That night, a different kind of message arrived. Varys came to Ned's chambers quietly. There are rumors, the spymaster said softly. Whispers from Essos. The young Targaryen boy gathers supporters. Exiles, sellswords. Viserys, Ned muttered. Yes, and he grows bold. He believes the realm divided. Ned felt a chill. Divided. Ned felt a chill. Divided. Dorne angry. The Lannisters guarded. The king defensive. The North distant. He had thought Robert's claim would unify the Seven Kingdoms, But instead, every decision seemed to carve deeper lines. "Does Robert know?" Ned asked. "He will," Varys replied. "But he will not like what it requires." "What does it require?" Varys looked at him carefully. "Decisiveness, ruthlessness." Ned knew what that meant. If Viserys gained enough support, Robert would not hesitate to send assassins. Children across the sea would again become targets. The cycle would continue. The next morning, news spread to the city like wildfire. Gregor Clegane had ridden south with 100 men. No royal order. No official command. Just a personal journey. Ned felt anger rise instantly. He went straight to the throne room. Robert sat on the Iron Throne, crowned slightly crooked, Cersei beside him. "Did you send him?" Ned demanded. Robert frowned. "Send who?" "Gregor Clegane." Robert glanced at Cersei. She remained calm. "I did not," Robert said. Ned turned to Cersei. "Then who did?" Her expression did not change. "The realm is large. Knights travel to Dorne." Ned pressed. "If he rides foolishly," she replied. "That is his choice." Ned stepped closer to the throne. "If he attacks Dorne, it will mean war." Robert stood abruptly. He would not dare. But even as he said it, doubt crept into his voice. Tywin entered moments later, summoned quickly. "Sir Gregor acts without my blessing," he said smoothly. "You expect me to believe that?" Ned asked. Tywin's gaze turned cold. "Believe what you wish." And that was the truth of it. The lion had moved a piece on the board, without the king's command, without the hand's consent. Robert looked suddenly smaller on the throne. The crown rested on his head, but control was slipping. Ned understood something painful in that moment. He had refused the throne to preserve his honor, but now power was being used without honor at all, and he did not hold enough authority to stop it. Outside the Red Keep, ravens were already flying south, and in Dorne, swords were being sharpened. The first blood was not spilled in a grand battle. It was spilled in the sand. News came 3 days later. Gregor Clegane had crossed into Dornish lands under the excuse of pursuing bandits. Villages near the border were burned. Small holdings attacked. No banners raised. No official declaration. Just firing steel, Dorne answered. A Lannister patrol was ambushed near the Prince's Pass. Not slaughtered, deliberately spared some of them, left alive to carry a message back north. This was no accident. This was retaliation. Ned stood before the Iron Throne once more as the surviving soldiers described what had happened. Their armor was scorched, their faces pale with fear. "They knew our movements," one man said. "They were waiting." Robert gripped the arms of the throne tightly. "So they want war. They want justice," Ned said quietly. Robert shot him a look. "Do not start." But Ned did not back down. "You allowed this to happen." "I did not send him," Robert roared. "No," Ned replied, his voice calm but sharp. "You only allowed the men who did to remain untouched." Silence fell across the hall. Cersei sat beside Robert, hands folded in her lap, face unreadable. But her eyes were alive, watching the tension grow. Tywin stood near the base of the throne steps, composed as ever. "Sir Gregor acted rashly," Tywin said. "He will be disciplined." "When?" Ned demanded. "When stability allows it," Tywin answered. Ned felt something inside him shift. The words were always the same. "Later, carefully, when the time is right." Justice delayed until it no longer mattered. Robert stood abruptly. "Enough! I will not be spoken to like this in my own hall." Ned turned toward him fully. "Then act like a king." The words echoed louder than he intended. Gasps rose among the gathered lords. Robert's face darkened. "You forget yourself." "No," Ned said, steady and unyielding. "I remember exactly who I am. I am the man who refused that throne because I believed you would rule better than I could. Prove me right." For a moment, something raw flashed across Robert's face. Doubt, anger, maybe even guilt. Tywin stepped in smoothly. "Your Grace, the Dornish are testing you. If you appear weak, the Reach may reconsider their loyalties. The Ironborn may stir. You must respond firmly." "And what is firm?" Ned asked bitterly. "Marching armies south." "If necessary," Tywin replied. Robert looked trapped. He had wanted feasts and hunts, not decisions that could split the realm. Jon Arryn stepped forward, his voice calm but urgent. We must send envoys first. Open talks with Sunspear before swords are drawn. Talk. Robert growled. They ambushed my men, and Gregor burned their villages, Ned said. Again the silence. Robert's hands trembled slightly on the throne. He hated this. Hated being cornered between pride and consequence. Finally he spoke. Fine. Envoys. But if they refuse to yield, we march. Tywin's jaw tightened slightly, but he bowed his head. As you command. It was a small victory for Ned, but it did not feel like one. That evening, word spread through King's Landing of possible war. The markets grew restless. Merchants whispered about closing shops. Sailors spoke of avoiding southern routes. And in the taverns, rumors took on darker shapes. They said the king could not control his own allies. They said the hand fought the queen. They said the lion guided the throne. Ned heard the whispers when he walked the streets in plain cloak. He had always believed a ruler should know what the small folk felt. What they felt now was uncertainty. In the Red Keep, another kind of tension brewed. Cersei confronted Robert privately, but the walls and castles are never as silent as they seem. You hesitate too much, she told him sharply. I am trying to prevent a war, Robert replied. You are trying to please Stark. Robert's voice grew dangerous. Watch yourself. Cersei did not flinch. The north is far away. The Westerlands are here. My father's armies are here. If you weaken him, you weaken yourself. I am the king, Robert snapped. Then act like it, she replied coldly, repeating Ned's words, but with a different meaning. The fracture widened. 2 days later, a raven arrived from the north. Winterfell reported Ironborn ships spotted along the western coast, not attacking, watching. Ned felt the ground shift beneath him. The Ironborn were sensing distraction. If the realm divided over Dorne, Balon Greyjoy would test the waters again. Everything was connected. That night, Ned stood alone in the throne room after everyone had gone. He walked up the steps slowly and looked at the Iron Throne. It sat silent, merciless. He remembered Robert offering it to him. He remembered refusing. He had believed that stepping aside would preserve unity, that Robert's blood claim would prevent further conflict. But now he saw the truth. The crown did not remove ambition. It attracted it. By refusing power, he had not prevented corruption. He had simply surrendered control over it. Footsteps echoed behind him. It was Jon Arryn. You carry too much, the old man said gently. Perhaps I should have carried more, Ned replied. Jon studied him. You cannot rewrite that choice. No, Ned said quietly, but I must live with its consequences. Jon placed a hand on his shoulder. Then ensure those consequences do not destroy the realm. Ned nodded slowly, but even as he did, a new raven was already flying south. This one did not carry demands, it carried confirmation. Gregor Clegane had attacked again, and this time, Dornish blood had not been the only blood spilled. A Lannister banner had been raised openly over a burning Dornish holdfast. War was no longer a possibility, it was beginning. The declaration did not come in ink, it came in steel. Dorne did not send another letter. No parchment, no seal, no plea for justice. Instead, riders struck along the border in coordinated waves. Supply lines were cut. Small keeps loyal to the crown were besieged, not large castles. Not yet, just enough to bleed the edges of the realm. It was careful, measured. It was war without naming it. In the throne room, the atmosphere had changed completely. The feasts were gone. The laughter had faded. Armor replaced silk. Robert stood before a war table now. Maps stretched across it, weighted down with daggers. They dare, he muttered. They prepared, Ned corrected. Tywin stood across from them, calm but sharp-eyed. This is precisely why strength must be shown immediately. We march south with overwhelming force, crush resistance before it spreads, and leave the coasts exposed? Ned asked. The Ironborn are already watching. They will not strike a united kingdom, Tywin replied. Are we united? Ned shot back. The words hung heavy. Robert looked exhausted. He had wanted glory. Instead, he was drowning in consequences. John Aaron stepped forward. If we send the full might of the realms south, we risk appearing desperate, but if we do nothing, we appear weak. There is no path without risk, Ned said. Robert rubbed his face roughly. Gods, I hate this. Ned stepped closer to the table. Then listen carefully. We send envoys again, but this time with real terms. Offer a trial for Gregor Clegane. Public, fair. Tywin's eyes hardened instantly. Unacceptable. Ned ignored him and continued. If Gregor refuses to appear, he is declared outlaw. The crown distances itself from his actions. You would sacrifice him, Tywin said coldly. I would sacrifice one man to prevent thousands from dying. Tywin's voice dropped. That one man represents the strength of the Westerlands. No, Ned replied evenly. He represents its brutality. The tension between them was no longer subtle. Robert looked from one to the other. If I hand over Clegane, what stops Dorne from demanding more? Justice might, Ned answered. Tywin gave a thin smile. Justice is rarely enough. And fear is rarely stable, Ned returned. Robert slammed his fist down. Enough. I will not let my kingdom tear itself apart over one night. Then act, Ned said firmly. Robert stared at the map, his knuckles whitened. Finally, he spoke. Gregor Clegane will be summoned to King's Landing. If he refuses, he is stripped of titles and lands. Tywin did not move. It was a blow. Not a killing one, but a blow. As you command, Tywin said at last. But there was no submission in his tone. That night, word spread quickly. The mountain had been summoned. In the barracks, Lannister men muttered angrily. In taverns, small folk whispered that the king had finally chosen a side. Cersei did not take the news quietly. She confronted Robert in their chambers. You humiliate my father, she said sharply. I protect the realm, Robert replied. You weaken your closest ally. I am not Tywin's puppet. Her voice went cold. Then prove it. Robert stepped closer, towering over her. Do not mistake my patience for weakness. And do not mistake my loyalty for obedience, she replied. Their marriage, barely begun, was already fracturing. Meanwhile, in the city's shadows, Varys listened. He reported quietly to Ned later that evening. The queen is displeased. The Westerlands are restless. If Gregor appears and is punished, Lord Tywin may withdraw support more subtly. Meaning, Ned asked, delayed funds, slower troop movements, strategic miscommunications, political sabotage. Ned exhaled slowly. And if Gregor refuses to come, then Tywin must choose between open defiance or careful retreat. Varys said softly. Ned nodded. Either way, the truth shows itself. But even as he spoke those words, another raven arrived, this one from the western shores. Iron-born ships had landed. Not a full invasion, just raids, testing. Balon Greyjoy was watching the southern conflict and probing for weakness. The realm was stretching thin. Robert received the news with visible frustration. I cannot fight on two fronts. Then do not create two fronts, Ned said quietly. Robert shot him a look. You think I created this? I think inaction did. Robert turned away angrily. Days passed with growing tension. Then the answer came. Gregor Clegane did not respond to the summons. He did not send a raven. He did not ride north. Instead, he attacked again, deeper into Dornish lands. This time, under full Lannister colors. It was open defiance. The news reached King's Landing at dusk. Ned stood before Robert as the message was read aloud. Silence filled the throne room. Robert's face turned red with fury. He disobeys a royal command? He roared. Tywin's voice remained controlled. Ser Gregor acts independently. His loyalty to the Westerlands does not override his duty to the crown. But he ignores the crown, Ned said sharply. Tywin's eyes met his. Then perhaps the crown must demonstrate its authority. It was a challenge. Robert stood slowly from the throne. Gregor Clegane is declared traitor to the realm, he announced, voice echoing across the hall. Any man who shelters him shares his fate. Gasps rippled through the court. Tywin did not bow. He did not speak. But his silence was louder than any protest. The lines were now drawn clearly, not just between Dorne and the crown, but between the crown and the lion. Ned felt it deeply. This was no longer just about justice. This was about control of the throne itself. And as he looked at Robert, standing there, furious, wounded, uncertain, Ned understood something painful. If he had taken the crown, Tywin would be challenging him directly. But because Robert wore it, the lion believed he could maneuver around it. The war in Dorne had become a test, not of armies, but of who truly ruled the Seven Kingdoms. And in Casterly Rock, word was already spreading. The lion does not forget insults. King's Landing felt different after the declaration. The air itself seemed tighter, like the city was holding its breath. Gregor Clegane had been named traitor. That alone would have shaken the realm. But what truly unsettled the court was not the outline of one violent night. It was the silence from Casterly Rock. No raven, no protest, no pledge of renewed loyalty. Just silence. And silence from Tywin Lannister was never empty. Ned stood at the window of the Tower of the Hand, watching ships drift in Blackwater Bay. He had sent urgent messages north, ordering the banners of the North to prepare, but not march. He would not drag his homeland into southern fire, unless there was no other choice. A knock came at his door. Enter. It was Varys. The Westerlands have begun calling their banners, the eunuch said softly. Ned turned slowly. In response to Gregor? In response to instability, Varys corrected. They claim they are strengthening defenses. Defenses against whom? Ned asked. Varys gave a small, knowing smile. That depends on who asks. It was open now. Not declared rebellion. Not yet, but the lion was unsheathing its claws. Does the king know? Ned asked. He will shortly. Ned exhaled slowly. The pieces were moving faster now. By midday, the council was assembled again. Robert looked angrier than Ned had ever seen him. Not battlefield anger. Not the roar of a warrior. This was betrayal. He dares raise banners? Robert thundered. Tywin stood across the chamber as composed as ever. The Westerlands prepare only as any wise region would in uncertain times. You prepare against me, Robert snapped. I prepare against chaos, Tywin replied calmly. Ned stepped in before Robert's temper exploded. If the Westerlands march without royal command, it will be seen as defiance. Tywin's gaze shifted to him. And if the crown cannot secure its borders, it will be seen as weakness. Dorne attacked after your bannerman burned their lands, Ned said sharply. An outlaw's actions, Tywin corrected. Your outlaw, Ned replied. The tension was suffocating. Cersei stood beside the throne, her face colder than ever. She had not spoken much in recent days, but her presence was constant, a reminder that the lion sat beside the stag. Robert descended the steps of the throne. If you mean to defy me, say it plainly, he growled. Tywin did not bow. I serve the crown, he said. But the crown, he said. But the crown must act wisely. And wisdom, Robert spat, means bending to you? No, Tywin answered evenly. It means understanding that power must be respected. The unspoken words hung in the air. If Robert pushed too hard, the Westerlands could openly rebel. If he yielded, he would appear controlled. Ned felt the weight of his past decision like never before. He had refused this throne because he did not want to rule through fear or politics. But now politics were ruling everything. Robert turned to Ned. What would you have me do? The question struck deep. For the first time, Robert was not arguing. He was asking. Ned stepped forward slowly. You cannot fight Dorne and the Westerlands at once, but you also cannot allow open defiance. Tywin watched him closely. You must call the banners of the Stormlands and the Reach. Ned continued. Not to march, but to gather, show that the realm stands behind the crown. And if they hesitate, Robert asked, then we learn who is loyal. Silence. Tywin's jaw tightened slightly. A dangerous game. War is already here, Ned replied. We simply choose how to face it. Robert hesitated only a moment before nodding. Send the ravens. The command echoed. The seven kingdoms would now reveal themselves. Within days, responses began to arrive. The Stormlands answered immediately. Loyal to Robert, the Reach hesitated, then agreed, though cautiously. The Vale pledged support through Jon Arryn's influence. But the Riverlands were divided, and the Westerlands did not answer. Instead, another message arrived. Gregor Clegane had gathered several minor houses and fortified himself near the Dornish border. Lannister banners flew openly beside him now. Not hidden, not denied, open. It was no longer a robed knight. It was open rebellion disguised as regional protection. Robert read the message in stunned silence. He forces my hand, the king muttered. Yes, Ned said quietly. He does. Robert looked at him then, something fragile in his eyes. If I march against the Westerlands, this becomes a full civil war. Ned nodded once. And if I don't? Then you are no longer king, Ned answered honestly. The truth hurt. Cersei stepped forward at last. If you march against my father's lands, she said softly, you declare war on your own queen. Robert looked at her, wounded. Choose carefully, she added. There it was, the fracture. Not just political. Personal. Robert turned away from her and looked at Ned again. You refuse this crown, he said quietly. Sometimes I wish you hadn't. Ned felt that like a blade. I wished it too, he admitted. That night, Robert made his choice. He ordered the royal army to prepare for march, not south, west, toward the Westerlands. Gasps filled the court when the announcement was made. A king marching against the most powerful house in his realm. It was madness or courage. History would decide. But as the banners were raised and war horns began to sound, Ned understood something with painful clarity. His refusal of the crown had not prevented bloodshed. It had only changed who would bleed first. And somewhere in Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister received the news without surprise. The lion had expected this, and lions did not roar without planning the hunt. Only one part remains. The march west began under a sky the color of steel. Robert rode at the front of his army, warhammers strapped across his back, armor gleaming beneath the hard sun. For the first time since the rebellion, he looked alive again, not laughing, not drunk, focused. War was the only language he truly understood. Behind him rode the banners of the Stormlands, the Reach, and the Vale. Not all their strength, but enough to make a statement. This was no longer about Dorne. This was about the throne. Ned rode beside Robert in silence for long stretches. He could feel the weight pressing on both of them. This was not like fighting the Mad King. That war had been clear. Right against wrong. Madness against justice. This was different. This was crown against gold. Word reached them 2 days into the march. Casterly Rock had closed its gates. Tywin had called every loyal house to his side. And more troubling still, the Riverlands had begun to fracture. Some lords declared for the crown. Others leaned quietly toward the lion. The realm was splitting along fault lines that had always existed. Robert read the report and let out a low breath. So he chooses open defiance. Yes, Ned said. He does. And Cersei. Ned hesitated. She has remained in King's Landing. But both men knew what that meant. The queen sat in the capital, surrounded by Lannister guards, gold cloaks loyal more to coin than to crown. If Tywin wished, he could strike at the heart of the realm without ever leaving his seat. That night, as campfires burned across the fields, Robert summoned Ned to his tent. The king removed his helmet and placed it on the table. His face looked older than it had only weeks ago. I never wanted this, Robert said quietly. I know, Ned answered. I wanted to avenge her, to end the madness, to drink and hunt and let someone else worry about this cursed chair. He looked up at Ned. You would have ruled better. Ned shook his head slowly. Perhaps differently. Not better. Robert gave a bitter laugh. You would not have let this happen. Ned did not reply immediately. Maybe he wouldn't have allowed Gregor to go unpunished from the start. Maybe he would have forced Tywin's hand earlier. Maybe he would have drawn the line before the lion grew bold. But maybe the lion would have rebelled sooner. Power tests every man, Ned said at last. It does not matter who wears the crown. It matters who stands against its corruption. Robert studied him carefully. And have you stood enough? The question struck deep. Ned thought of the day in the throne room. The moment he had stepped back, he had believed honor meant refusing power he did not seek. Now he understood something harder. Sometimes honor means carrying power, even when you do not want it. Before he could answer, the tent flap opened abruptly. A rider, breathless and pale. "Your Grace," he gasped. King's Landing. Robert stood instantly. What of it? The Queen has taken control of the city. The gold cloaks answer to her. The gates are closed. Silence crashed into the tent. Ned felt it like ice in his veins. She claims to act in defense of the crown, the writer continued, but her banners fly beside Lannister red. Robert's face drained of color. She moves before her father even meets us, Ned said softly. Tywin had planned this perfectly. While the king marched west, the lioness secured the capital. If Robert lost this campaign, Cersei would control the throne in his absence. If Robert won, he would return to a city no longer fully his. It was a trap. Robert slammed his fist into the table. I am the king. Yes, Ned said calmly. But she sits on your throne. For a long moment, Robert said nothing. Then he looked at Ned, not as a king to his hand, but as a friend. What would you do? He asked. Ned's heart pounded heavily. This was the moment. The choice he had once avoided now stood before him again, not in ceremony, not in gold, but in fire and consequence. If you turn back now, Ned said carefully, Tywin strengthens his position in the west and claims victory. And if I continue, Robert asked, then you must win quickly, decisively, break his strength before the capital turns fully against you. Robert nodded slowly. And if I fall? He asked quietly. Ned held his gaze. Then the realm will remember who stood for it. Robert exhaled deeply. Then we march at dawn. Outside, the wind shifted. Far away in King's Landing, Cersei stood before the Iron Throne. The hall was quieter than it had been during her wedding feast. Lannister guards lined the walls. She ran her fingers lightly along one of the twisted blades. The wolf refused it, she murmured softly to herself. The stag struggles to hold it. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the polished steel of the swords. And lions, she whispered, take what others hesitate to claim. Back in the war camp, Ned walked alone beneath the stars. He had refused the crown because he believed honor meant stepping aside. Now he understood the cruel truth. When a good man refuses power, it does not vanish. It waits for someone else to take it. And in the distance, thunder rolled, not from storm clouds, but from marching armies. The war for the Iron Throne had never truly ended. It had only changed hands.